Welcome back, everyone. We are doing something a little specialized today, something really exciting.
We certainly are.
You are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic analysis of the essay.
It is a fascinating experiment to be a part of, and frankly, considering the material we are tackling today, it really demands that kind of dynamic back-and-forth analysis. We are looking at something that sits right at the center of the human experience.
Absolutely. We are talking about desire. And I know the moment you hear that word, the brain usually takes a shortcut.
It does.
You probably think of romance, or maybe that new smartphone you have been eyeing, or maybe just a really, really good slice of pizza. But today, we are going to look under the hood. We are stripping away the rom-com definition and looking at desire as the engine of human life.
It's not just about wanting things.
No, it is about what moves us to act, to think, and to feel.
It is the fundamental why behind everything we do. Without desire, we are statues. And to guide us through this massive terrain, we are diving into great idea number 17 in the Syntopicon.
Now, our mission today is specific. We're not discussing a whole book here. We're doing a deep dive into the essay by Mortimer Adler on this subject. Our goal is to take a journey through about 2,500 years of Western thought.
A massive journey.
A huge one. We want to figure out, is desire a defect? Is it a natural power? Is it a danger to be contained? Or is it actually the only path to happiness?
It is the ultimate question of motivation. Adler effectively argues that you cannot have a coherent view of ethics or politics or even psychology without first deciding what you think desire is.
Is it a friend or an enemy?
Precisely. You have to take a stand.
So let's unpack this. We need to start with the basics. When a philosopher like Adler talks about desire in this essay, he isn't just talking about a craving for chocolate, is he? It feels bigger.
No, he is casting a much, much wider net. If we just stick to cravings, we miss the entire point. Adler defines it broadly as the felt impulse.
The felt impulse. Let's pause on that for a second. That's a very physical-sounding term.
It is, and deliberately so. It is that movement within us, a literal felt push or pull, either toward an object we view as good or away from an object we view as bad.
So in this philosophical context, desire covers everything from physical appetite and burning passion to subtle emotions and sudden impulses.
If it moves you, it falls under this umbrella. It's the whole spectrum of motivation.
It is the push and the pull, the attraction and the repulsion.
Exactly. But here is where it gets nuanced, and we have to be careful with our terms. The essay distinguishes between desire, with a capital D, that big general category of all motivational movement.
The family name.
The family name, yes. And desire, with a lowercase d, which is often used to describe a specific passion within that family.
Okay, help me distinguish those. I want to make sure we're precise here so we don't get lost in the weeds later.
Think of the general category, capital D, desire, as the whole genus of wanting. But within that family, you have specific types or species. First, you have the sensual or animal desires.
The ones we share with all living creatures.
Right. In medieval philosophy, and this is a great term, they often called these concupiscible.
Concupiscible. And that is a word you definitely do not hear in casual conversation at the grocery store. It sounds like something you would get arrested for.
It is a mouthful. It comes from the Latin concupiscere, meaning to long for or to covet. But philosophically, it essentially refers to the desires for physical gratification: food, drink, sex, comfort, the things the body screams for.
The biological imperatives.
Correct. But then, distinct from those, you have rational or intellectual desires.
Okay, so concupiscible is the body. Rational desire is the mind.
Precisely. These are desires that are shaped not by your stomach or your hormones, but by your reason. They are directed at objects that only the intellect can grasp.
So wanting a sandwich is concupiscible. Wanting justice or wanting to understand the theory of relativity, that would be rational desire.
Yes. You don't get hungry for justice, your stomach doesn't growl for truth, but you still want them. That want, that striving, is a rational desire.
And it can be just as powerful, if not more so, than the bodily ones.
Absolutely. People die for justice, they dedicate their lives to truth, and the essay highlights another crucial split that Thomas Aquinas really refined. He distinguished between simple desires and irascible passions.
Irascible. I usually hear that used to describe a grumpy old neighbor. Old man Jenkins is irascible.
In modern English, yes, it implies irritability. But philosophically, irascible comes from ira, meaning anger or wrath. It refers to the passions that arise when we face obstacles.
Obstacles. How does that change the desire?
Well, Simple or concupiscible desires are easy. I love this, I hate that, I have joy, I have sorrow. It is a direct relationship with a thing you want, considered simply as good or bad.
It's straightforward. I see a cookie, I want the cookie.
But irascible passions deal with the arduous good, something that is good but hard to get. It requires a fight. Or an arduous evil, something bad that's hard to avoid.
Ah, so it introduces difficulty into the equation.
Exactly. This is where we find fear, daring, hope, and despair. These are not about the object itself, but about our struggle to attain or avoid it.
That is a fascinating distinction. So desire isn't just I want, it is also I hope I can get it, or I dare to try, or even I despair of ever reaching it.
It covers the entire landscape of human striving against difficulty. It maps the struggle.
And that brings us to the first major metaphysical battleground in the essay. And this is a big one. It fundamentally changes how you see yourself when you wake up in the morning.
It's the foundational question.
I love these pivotal moments. Lay it out for us. What is the battle?
The debate is between desire as lack versus desire as capacity.
Okay, lack versus capacity. Let's start with lack. It sounds intuitive.
It is very intuitive. This is largely the view associated with Plato, and later much of Christian theology adopted it. The argument is deceptively simple. We desire what we do not have.
Right. You don't desire the air you're currently breathing. You only desire it if you're holding your breath.
Perfect example. You don't desire the shoes you are already wearing, you desire the ones in the store window.
If I am full, I don't desire dinner. I only desire it when I am empty. My desire is proof that I am missing something.
Exactly. So follow the logic. If desire is always for what is absent, then desire is a symptom of deficiency. It implies that to desire is to be incomplete, broken, or empty.
So desire is a sign of imperfection.
Yes. The implication is that we are trying to fill a hole in our existence. We are ontologically leaky vessels, as Plato suggests in the Gorgias, always trying to pour things in to make ourselves whole, but never quite succeeding.
That paints a picture of the human condition as being kind of tragic. We are these eternal beggars, constantly scraping for what we don't have. It makes desire feel like a sickness, a symptom of being broken.
It does carry a sense of tragedy. It suggests that if we were perfect like God, we wouldn't want anything. We would be complete. So every desire is a painful reminder of our distance from that perfection.
But you said there is an opposing view.
A profoundly different one.
Yes, you mentioned capacity.
This is the Aristotelian view. Aristotle looks at the same phenomenon, the wanting, and sees something completely different. He argues that desire isn't just about fixing a defect. It is the unimpeded exercise of a natural capacity.
That sounds much more positive. But unpack natural capacity for me.
Think of an athlete. A runner desires to run, not because they are lacking running or because not running is a defect. They desire to run because they are built to run. They have legs, lungs, and muscles designed for that action.
So the desire is the proof that the capacity exists.
Exactly. When they run, they aren't filling a hole. They are expressing their nature. They are flourishing. It's the fulfillment of their potential, their telos.
I see. So for Aristotle, desire is the engine of life doing what it's supposed to do. It is the acorn desiring to become the oak tree. It is not that the acorn is broken, it is that the acorn is full of potential.
Correct. Desire is the energy of potential converting into actual reality. Desire is the voice of our own nature calling us to become what we can be.
So the question for us listening to this is, do we see ourselves as beggars trying to be full or as athletes trying to run?
And that shift in perspective changes everything. If you view desire as lack, satisfaction means silence. You filled the hole, the desire stops. You eat the sandwich, the hunger dies. Peace is the absence of wanting.
It's a state of rest, or return to zero.
But if you view it as capacity, satisfaction is activity, you are doing what you are made to do. And the desire is the energy fueling that excellence. You don't want the running to stop, you want to stay in the flow. Satisfaction isn't rest, it's performance.
That is a powerful reframe. It makes desire feel less like a burden and more like a superpower. But let's look at how the ancients managed this energy, because whether it is a lack or a capacity, we can agree that this stuff is powerful. It can ruin your life if you let it run wild.
Without a doubt, unchecked desire is dangerous. And that brings us to the famous imagery from the Greeks regarding how to handle this power. Plato, in particular, gave us one of the most enduring metaphors in history, the tripartite soul.
The three-part soul. This is classic.
Yes. Plato visualized the soul as having three distinct components: rhetorica, spirit, and appetite. And in his dialogue Phaedrus, he used the analogy of the charioteer to explain how they interact.
Always loved this image. It's very cinematic. So reason is the charioteer, right? Holding the reins.
Correct. Reason is the driver. He is the one with the map, the plan, and the judgment. And pulling the chariot are two horses.
Two horses.
One represents spirit, that is the noble, competitive, driven side of us, the part that wants honor and victory. It loves a good challenge.
Okay, so that is a good horse, a well-behaved one.
Ideally, yes. It's aligned with reason in the best-case scenario. But then there is the other horse. This represents appetite, the unruly, beastly side that just wants food, sex, comfort, and money. It is the id, the concupiscible part.
And these horses are not exactly team players. They aren't trotting in unison.
Not at all. They are pulling in different directions. Appetite wants to veer off into the ditch to graze or chase something appealing. Spirit might want to charge off a cliff for glory or get into a fight.
So the charioteer's job is a constant struggle.
A constant struggle. The charioteer reason has to force them to cooperate. He has to whip the bad horse and encourage the good one. The key takeaway for Plato is governance. Reason must rule. If the horses take over, the chariot crashes.
So it is a hierarchy. It is not a democracy inside the soul. Reason is the boss. Desire is the subordinate that needs to be controlled.
Yes. Plato is quite strict about this. He sees a political parallel. If the mob appetite rules the city, you have chaos. The philosopher king, reason, must rule. The passions must be subjugated.
It's a very top-down management style.
Very. But then Aristotle, who was Plato's student, remember, comes along and refines this. He looks at the chariot and thinks, you know, if you pull the reins that hard, you're going to kill the horses.
He has a different approach to animal husbandry.
A much different one. So what does Aristotle propose?
He doesn't want to break the horse's spirits. He wants to train them.
That is a subtle but important difference. Breaking versus training.
It is huge. Aristotle's goal isn't to destroy desire, but to moderate it, his famous doctrine of the golden mean.
Exactly. He believes the passions can actually be taught to listen to reason. They can become allies. It is not about elimination. It is about proper management. He wants us to feel the right amount of desire for the right thing at the right time.
So courage, for instance, is the mean between cowardice and recklessness. You need a little fear and a little daring, but not too much of either.
Precisely. The goal is harmony, not tyranny. So Plato is gripping the reins with white knuckles, sweating, trying to keep the beast in line. Aristotle is more like the horse whisperer. He is doing dressage.
He is getting the horse to want to go where the driver wants to go.
That is a brilliant analogy. Aristotle sees a potential for harmony that Plato is more skeptical of. Aristotle believes you can develop virtue, which is basically a good habit. Eventually, the horse just knows the way home. It becomes second nature.
That sounds much more sustainable and, well, more pleasant. But if you think Plato was strict with his chariot, wait until we get to the Stoics. They take this to a whole new level.
Oh, yes. The Stoics. They don't mess around. The essay transitions to the Stoic school thinkers like Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius. They took a much harder line than Aristotle.
Harder than Plato, even.
I would say so. For them, passions aren't just unruly horses. They are intrinsically evil.
Intrinsically evil. That seems harsh. Even joy. Even hope.
For a hardline Stoic, yes, in a specific sense. They viewed passions as lawless elements. They believed that passion is always in rebellion against duty and reason.
Why? Why are they so hostile to them?
Because passions are reactions to external events. And for the Stoic, true freedom comes from being independent of everything external. If you feel joy because you got a promotion, you're a slave to your boss. If you feel fear because of a storm, you're a slave to the weather.
So if you are acting out of passion, even a good passion, you aren't free. You are a slave to an external impulse. You are reacting to the world, not ruling yourself.
You're a puppet, and the world is pulling your strings. So what is their solution? If Aristotle says moderate, what do the Stoics say?
Their policy is attrition.
Attrition. That is a military term, like a war of attrition. You grind the enemy down.
Exactly. The goal is to starve the enemy. The Stoics argue we should attenuate the force of our passions. We need to weaken them, to emancipate our reason. They want to reach a state of apatheia, which doesn't mean apathy in the modern lazy sense, but freedom from suffering and passion, a state of serene invulnerability.
It sounds like they're trying to turn themselves into beings of pure logic. Spock before Spock was cool.
There is a chilling but powerful concept in the essay regarding the Stoics. Nothing is lost if the passions atrophy and die.
Wow. Nothing is lost. That is a bold claim. It implies the passions add zero value to the human experience. They are just noise.
It implies they are a net negative. It feels like an internal civil war. whereas Aristotle was proposing an internal management strategy. That is the perfect way to contrast them. The Aristotelian tries to be a good king over his citizens, helping them thrive. The Stoic tries to be a lone survivor in a fortress, keeping the invaders out.
And this fortress mentality, it was very appealing in the ancient world, which was full of chaos and tyranny. If you can't control the world, you control your reaction. You kill the desire so you can't be hurt.
So we move from the ancient Greeks and Romans into the Middle Ages. And obviously, the dominant force here is Christian theology. How does that change the map of desire? Because Christianity talks a lot about heart and love.
It changes the center of gravity completely. We move from a focus purely on reason as the savior to a focus on love as the central organizing principle.
And Augustine.
Yes, St. Augustine. He is one of the most psychologically penetrating thinkers in history.
Yeah.
He looks at those lists of passions the Greeks came up with, fear, confidence, distress, pleasure, and says, this is all too complicated. It is really all just love.
How does he figure that?
Oh.
How is fear the same as love? It seems like an opposite.
He argues that every passion is just love changing its shape based on the situation. He has this beautiful formula for it. He says it's all about the orientation of the will.
Break it down for us.
He says, look at the movement of the will. When love strains toward an object it doesn't have, we call it desire. It is love reaching out.
Okay, that makes sense.
When love possesses and enjoys that object, when it finally gets what it wants, we call it joy. It is love resting.
Okay, that covers the positive stuff. What about the negative?
When love shuns something that opposes it, something that threatens the beloved, we call it fear. It's love in a protective crouch.
I see. It's love anticipating a loss.
And when love feels that opposition actually happening, when the bad thing arrives and hurts the beloved, we call it grief. It's love wounded.
That is incredibly elegant. It unifies everything. It is not a zoo of different animals. It is one force, love, reacting to the terrain of the world.
It is poetic and psychological. It implies that if you want to fix your emotions, you don't just suppress fear or manage anger. You fix your love. You have to ask, what do I love and in what order?
Order your loves. That is very Augustinian. But then as we move later into the Middle Ages, we get the great systematizer, Thomas Aquinas. If Augustine was the poet, Aquinas was the architect.
The man with the spreadsheets.
Yes.
Essentially. Aquinas builds this massive categorization of the passions in his Summa Theologica. He takes that Aristotelian base, especially the irascible distinction, and expands it into a cathedral of logic. He pairs them up.
Pairs them up, like opposites.
Yes. Almost every passion has a mirror image. In the concupiscible appetite, you have love versus hate, desire versus aversion, joy versus sorrow.
Perfect symmetry.
And in the irascible appetite, you have hope versus despair, courage versus fear. But here is a nugget from the essay that I always find fascinating. There is one passion that has no opposite pair.
Really? Which one breaks the symmetry?
Anger.
Anger has no opposite. Wouldn't it be calm or patience or gentleness?
You would think so.
Yeah.
But Aquinas argues that calm is just the absence of anger or the quieting of the soul. It is not a contrary movement. Love has a contrary movement. Hate, you actively push away. Hope has a contrary movement. Despair, you actively give up. Anger is a singular, aggressive response to difficulty, specifically to a perceived injustice. There's no passion that is an active movement away from rectifying an injustice in the same way.
So there's no anti-anger emotion.
Not in his system. Anger is a unique flare-up against an obstacle. It doesn't have a reverse gear. It just has to fade away or be resolved. It stands alone.
That is profound. It makes anger feel dangerous in a unique way.
Yeah.
It is a one-way street.
Precisely. It is a tool for breaking through barriers, but if it misfires, it has no natural counterbalance within the system of passions.
You know, talking about fading away, finding clarity, and organizing our loves. This feels like the perfect time to take a quick mental break. We have covered a lot of history, from chariots to theologians to the architecture of the soul.
It is a lot to digest. The sheer density of these ideas can be overwhelming.
It is, and if you are the kind of person who loves digesting these kinds of deep ideas, but wants to do it while you are on the go, or maybe while you are just trying to center yourself in a chaotic world, you need to check out Mindful Moments.
Yes, Mindful Moments is our YouTube channel, and it is really a treasure trove for people like us.
It offers AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques. Kind of like what we are doing now, but covering a huge range of topics. Fiction, nonfiction, philosophy, self-help. It is designed to inspire reflection and rational thought in a world that often lacks both.
It's a way to keep engaging with big ideas in a manageable way.
So if you want to keep nourishing your mind, go search for mindful moments. It is a great resource for keeping that intellectual spark alive between these deep dives.
Well said.
Absolutely. Now, let's jump back into the timeline. We have done the ancients, we have done the medievals, we have seen the soul as a chariot and as a cathedral. Now we hit the Enlightenment, the modern era. And things start to get mechanical.
They do. The tone shifts dramatically. We meet Thomas Hobbes in the 1600s, and Hobbes is a materialist.
Meaning he only believes in physical matter. Everything is just atoms in motion.
Right. He looks at the human being and doesn't see a soul, in the Greek sense, some ghostly driver. He sees a machine. He sees a complex biological automaton.
So how does a machine feel desire? Machines don't want things. My toaster doesn't want toast.
Hobbes views passions as mechanical motions, literally physical movements inside the body. He calls them endeavors.
Endeavors.
And he defines them simply as motions to or from the object.
To or from. That is it. That's all love and hate are.
That is the core physics of it. It strips away the moral weight. It is not about sin or virtue initially. It is just physics. Attraction and repulsion. We're like magnets. If I see an apple and I am hungry, there is a literal physiological motion toward the apple. That is desire.
And if I see a tiger?
There is a motion away. That is aversion. It's that simple. Love is the motion toward. Hate is the motion away.
That is a cold way to look at love, just a biological magnet. It takes the romance out of poetry pretty fast.
It is reductionist. But if Hobbes made it mechanical, the next guy, David Hume, flipped the entire building upside down.
Hume, the essay highlights him as the big turning point, the pivot.
He is the shock to the system. Remember Plato's charioteer. Reason is the driver, desire is the horse. The driver is in charge.
Right. That has been the standard model for 2,000 years, more or less. Reason rules.
Hume looks at that and says, no, that is completely wrong. That is a fantasy. Hume famously argues, reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions.
Whoa, slave of the passions. That is a total reversal. He is putting the horse in the driver's seat.
He's not just putting the horse in the driver's seat. He's saying the horse owns the chariot, the driver, the whole stable. It's the most shocking inversion in the history of this idea.
So what's his argument? How can reason be a slave?
Hume argues that reason is inert. Logic can't make you do anything.
Explain that. Logic seems pretty powerful to me. It builds bridges and sends rockets to the moon.
It does all of that. But logic only provides information. It can tell you that an apple is on the table. It can tell you that the apple contains calories. It can tell you how to walk to the table. But, and this is key, logic cannot give you a reason to want the apple.
I see. Logic is data. Desire is the motive.
Exactly. Only desire can provide the impulse, the passion to live, to eat, to survive. So in Hume's world, desire is the driver. And reason.
Reason is just the staff.
Reason is just the GPS.
I love that analogy. Let's stick with that.
Think about it. You get in your car, the GPS creates the route, it calculates the traffic, it is very smart, very rational, but the GPS doesn't care where you go. It has no preference.
It's indifferent.
Completely. You, the desiring agent, have to input the destination. Take me to the gym. Take me to the donut shop. Desire sets the destination. Reason just figures out the most efficient way to get there.
That challenges everything regarding ethics. If reason is just a slave, then we can't really judge desires as irrational, can we?
Exactly. That is the scary conclusion Hume reaches. He says it is not irrational to prefer the destruction of the whole world to the scratching of your finger.
Wait, repeat that. Preferring the destruction of the world to a scratched finger.
Yes. It sounds insane, and morally it is insane. But Hume says, where is the logical error? Logic says A implies B, but I prefer X to Y is not a logic puzzle. It is a feeling. It is a statement of passion.
So if I genuinely feel that my finger is more important than the world, I am being selfish. I am being a monster, but I'm not being illogical.
In Hume's view, that's correct. You can't reason someone out of a preference. You can only appeal to a different, stronger preference, maybe their desire for self-preservation.
That is terrifying. It removes the guardrails. It means there is no objective right thing to want.
It is moral subjectivity in its purest form. And that terror, that idea that we are just slaves to our whims, is exactly what woke Immanuel Kant up.
Kant, The Empire Strikes Back. He wasn't going to let Hume get away with that.
Kant reads Hume and essentially says, absolutely not. This cannot be the basis of human life or morality. Kant launches a counterattack to save the authority of reason.
So he brings back the charioteer.
In a way, but he is even stricter than the Stoics. Kant argues that moral worth comes only from acting out of duty.
Duty, the favorite word of the German philosopher.
He creates a firewall between inclination, what you want to do, your desires, and duty, what you ought to do, what reason commands.
Give me an example.
The one in the essay is perfect. If you visit your sick grandmother because you love her, and it makes you feel warm and fuzzy to hold her hand.
Sounds like a nice thing to do.
It is nice, but Kant says that action has no moral worth.
Wait, really? Because I want to do it, it doesn't count. That seems absurd. I'm still helping my grandmother.
You are doing a nice thing, but not a moral thing in his specific system, because you are acting on inclination, that biological magnet again. You are just doing what pleases you. It's a happy accident that it also helps her.
So when does it become moral?
To act morally, you must act purely because it is the right thing to do, regardless of how you feel. Even if you hated visiting the hospital, even if you were tired and grumpy and would rather be anywhere else, you go anyway because it is your duty. That is moral action.
So for Kant, the desire pollutes the deed.
In a sense, yes. He warns against the seduction of the will by the passions. For Kant, desires are obstacles. They are the static on the radio that prevents you from hearing the clear voice of the categorical imperative.
So we have gone from desire is the engine, Hume, back to desire is the enemy, Kant.
Yeah.
This pendulum just keeps swinging back and forth through history.
And it swings right into the 20th century, where we meet Sigmund Freud. And the essay notes that Freud takes us out of the philosophy department and into the basement.
The unconscious, the spooky basement of the mind.
Freud and the psychoanalytic view introduce a new layer. Desire isn't just a philosophical category anymore. It is biological, evolutionary, and often hidden from us. We might not even know what we desire.
We think we want a promotion, but we actually want our father's approval.
Precisely. The essay mentions his view on religious desire specifically, doesn't it?
It does. Freud is a reductionist, similar to Hobbes, but with more psychological complexity. He looks at the massive, complex human desire for God, the yearning for the infinite, and explains it away.
How does he explain it? He calls it a surrogate for the father. He argues it is a projection of infantile dependence. We are scared children in a big, scary universe, so we invent a cosmic father to protect us. The desire for God is just a misplaced desire for parental security.
So he takes the desire as lack idea to the extreme. We are just babies missing our dads, so we invent the universe.
Roughly, yes. But the key shift here is that desire is no longer something to be reasoned with in a dialogue, like Aristotle thought. It is a mechanism to be analyzed, dissected, and explained by science. It is not about virtue anymore. It is about pathology or development.
You don't train a neurosis, you cure it.
Exactly.
Which brings us to today. We are living in a world that Freud, Hume, and Hobbes built, a world of materialism, subconscious drives, and subjective values. Why does this ancient essay matter to us right now in 2026?
It matters more than ever because we are arguably living in the golden age of manipulated desire.
Marketing, the algorithm.
Marketing, capitalism, algorithms, social media. Think about it. Our entire economy is built on identifying, cultivating, and satisfying desires. But the question the essay forces us to ask is, are these desires natural or are they artificial?
Right. Do I actually want that new car? Or has a team of psychologists and designers made me want it? Am I an athlete running my own race? Or am I a horse being led to water by a very clever advertiser?
And we have the neuroscience now, too. We know about dopamine loops. We know that when we scroll on our phones, we are caught in a biological desire loop, a concupiscible loop, that feels very much like what the Greeks were worried about with their wild horses.
Exactly. This connects to the ancient concept of akrasia.
Akrasia, that is a critical term. It translates to incontinence or weakness of will.
It is the puzzle of, I know what is good for me, but I do the opposite.
Yes. I know I should sleep, but I scroll. I know I should eat a salad, but I eat the cake. Plato thought this was just ignorance. If you really knew better, you would do better. He couldn't believe someone would knowingly hurt themselves.
Plato was an optimist about human intelligence.
He was. But Aristotle knew it was deeper. It is a failure of habit. Today, we call it addiction or poor impulse control. But the philosophical problem is identical. The GPS says turn left for health, but the driver, desire, turns right for pleasure.
There's also this concept in the essay called the guise of the good.
Yes.
I found this really sticky. It sounds like a mystery novel title.
It is a fascinating modern puzzle. The question is, do we desire things because they are good, or do we call them good simply because we desire them?
That is the Hume question again. Is value real, Or is it just a projection of our wanting?
It is. The guise of the good theory suggests that even when we want something bad, like drugs or revenge, we view it under the guise of something good.
What do you mean by that?
The drug addict isn't saying, I want death or I want to destroy my family. They are saying, I want relief. Relief is good. The vengeful person isn't saying, I want evil. They were saying, I want justice.
So we trick ourselves. We dress up our bad desires in a good costume so we can live with ourselves.
Exactly. This leads to the problem of fallibility. Our desires can lie to us. They can misrepresent the value of things. They can promise happiness and deliver misery.
And if our desires can lie, then we cannot just follow our hearts blindly. That is terrible advice if your heart is wearing a disguise. We need a filter.
We need a charioteer, or at least a very good GPS that knows when to say recalculating. We need to interrogate our desires. I want this. But is it actually good, or does it just feel good?
So we have looked at 2,500 years of debate. We have the Stoics starving the passions, the Aristotelians training them, Hume unleashing them, and Kant ignoring them. Where does Mortimer Adler leave us? What is the synthesis?
Adler is brilliant here because he doesn't hand us a single winner. He doesn't say, Aristotle won, everyone else go home.
Classic Adler. He loves the tension. He wants us to hold the opposing views in our minds at the same time.
Instead, he shows us that the Western tradition reveals that both sides, desire is dangerous and desire is natural capture partial truths. It depends entirely on the context.
Explain that. How can they both be true?
Well, ask yourself, what are you trying to do? If you are trying to build a stable character for everyday life, Aristotle is your guy. You need moderation. You need to train your desires to enjoy the right things so you can function in society.
Okay, that makes sense for daily living.
Yeah.
I want to be the moderate horse trainer on a Tuesday.
But what if you are in a crisis? What if you are a prisoner of war or facing extreme temptation or torture or grief that threatens to break you?
Then moderation probably isn't enough.
Right. Then the Aristotelian middle path might not work. The Stoic policy of attrition, of shutting down your feelings to protect your mind, might be the only thing that saves you.
So Stoicism is emergency gear. Aristotle is daily wear.
That is a great way to put it. And if you want to understand motivation, why people actually buy things, vote for people, or fall in love, you have to look at Hume. You have to acknowledge that passion is the engine. You can't just lecture people into action. You have to move their desires.
And Kant. Where does he fit?
Kant is for when the stakes are absolute. When you need to act on a principle that holds true for everyone, everywhere, regardless of how you feel. It's for defining the moral bedrock.
So the essay teaches us intellectual humility. We can't just have one theory of human nature. We need a toolbox.
Exactly. Our view of desire depends on our assumptions. If you think humans are fallen and broken, you will fear desire as a temptation. If you think humans are natural animals striving for growth, you will celebrate it as capacity. Adler wants us to see that we are probably a complicated mix of both.
We are the beggar and the athlete. We are the charioteer and the horse. We are the GPS and the driver.
And understanding that tension, living within that tension, is what it means to know yourself. It means knowing when to whip the horse and when to give it an apple.
This has been an incredible journey through the felt impulse.
Yeah.
It really makes you rethink that next impulse you feel. Is it a lie? Is it a capacity? Or is it just a magnet pulling you?
It is the question that defines us. Whether you are a Stoic trying to starve your passions or an Aristotelian trying to train them, you have to engage with the question. You can't just let the car drive itself.
And that is a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive into the essay from the Syntopicon.
Indeed. It was a pleasure.
We want to thank you for listening to this experiment. If you want to keep exploring these massive ideas, click the link on screen for more on this and other essay subjects.
Yes, please do. Subscribe, share, purchase via the link, and most importantly, think rationally.
Nourish your mind on the go.